Cam Smith played for USC and was a two-time captain, 4-year starter, and one of the best linebackers to play at USC. He also got drafted and played in the NFL for the Minnesota Vikings. In this episode, we talk about what it takes to be one of the best athletes on the field, how strength coaches can learn to connect with their athletes, and we also talk with Cam about his post-football playing career, what he's doing nowadays. Before we get into this episode, please hit that like and subscribe button. 2026 ends the 3-year current CEU cycle for the NSCA. Do not wait until December 31st, 2026 to get your CEUs submitted to the NSCA. Get it taken care of now with an annual membership to Strength Coach Network, where you will get access to Performance Coaching 101, 102, 103, with each course giving you access to 2.0 NSCA CEUs. If you also need CSCCa CEUs, those same courses come with 10 CEUs to the CSCCa. If you need CEUs to the NSCA, CSCCa, you need help getting reinstated by going through all the process for the CSCCa from last year, or you want to just make sure you knock out everything for the NSCA with this year, 2026, being a reporting period, please reach out to us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com. We will get you taken care of. We'll help you get everything lined up so you can keep your certification and you don't have to worry about anything other than coaching your athletes. Again, you can click the link down below for more information or email us at service@strengthcoachnetwork.com. TeamBuildr is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for online software for strength coaches. It does not matter what sector of strength and conditioning you work in, you want to get TeamBuildr because you will be able to program for your athletes, simply distribute the training to them, and make changes, modifications, whatever you need. I've been utilizing them since 2019 when I was back at Towson. I still use it in person at Goldfinch with all my remote clients throughout the country, and in person at the high school, Centennial High, right down the road when I was volunteering for them. You got to check out TeamBuildr in the link down below. The people that work for them are former strength and conditioning coaches, so they get it. They are able to help you with all of your needs. Again, reach out to your TeamBuildr rep and learn more about them in the link down below. I'm in Ankeny, Iowa right now, and I am 25 minutes north of Des Moines, and I'm 25 minutes south of Ames because my wife works up in Ames at Iowa State.
Gotcha. Okay.
Nice. Now, you guys at USC, you never traveled into even any of your non-conference games. Did you guys ever travel to the Midwest?
We played Notre Dame every year, or every other
yes,
year.
That was about as. I mean, and that's.
No, I would say the closest we got outside of South Bend to the Midwest was probably Colorado, or I guess Colorado. But other than that, no. We played in Texas a couple times at AT&T. That's pretty much it. We have, I think this year was the first year we played at Rutgers. This was the first time we had won a game. When I say we USC as a whole, east of Colorado. It's the first time we won a game east of Colorado since 2011.
Holy cow.
We have a horrible travel record over the last decade and a half. It's crazy. We haven't won in South Bend since 2011. I think the last game that we had won was I think Matt Barkley, that team went to like Boston College or something like that and won a game. That was it. It's crazy.
Now, anybody that's listening, he said we have Cam coming on the show, so we can talk about a lot of different topics, but we've been having more and more former NFL players, former college football players coming on the show, so strength coaches can hear from athletes, not only just coaches, because you can get into a little bit of an isolative box. We just had Adam Archuleta on the show about 2 weeks ago. So to get your perspective on things, first of all, you just said we. Are people going to be saying that anymore with this new world where there's transferring, or you're a USC alum? Are you welcome? We're probably going to be welcoming everybody in, but it's is that still brotherhood even there?
So, and that's I would say USC is an interesting place.
Yeah, because you guys are a destination locate. That's you know what I mean?
Yeah, and also we're a lot of people joke about the cult of USC. Right on the West Coast, it's people are proud to wear the cardinal and gold. We talk, a big reason why I ended up committing there. This idea of the Trojan family was was consistently conveyed to us, Trojan family. Like, no matter what life looks like after football, the Trojan family's there. They love to help their fellow Trojans, and so it is a unique time where, I haven't spent much time around Lincoln, but I was obviously there with Clay, and Clay, definitely not to sit here and judge or criticize, the head coach at USC, because I understand how difficult it is, because your expectations are really high and your help is very little. You have these crazy demands, but you're really not. There's not a great support system behind you. I know it's changed a little bit. I think Jen Cohen has done an incredible job, but I think Clay had so much success there. And just obviously, he's an incredible dude. He's one of the best people I've ever been around in my life. But that's Clay Helton I'm talking about. But he leaned in so hard to the traditions of USC. He loved being a Trojan, and I think seeing the world the way it is today, where you have a lot of kids who have been to multiple different schools before even either going to USC or transferring out of USC and going to multiple different schools, it's interesting to see what they claim at the next level, right? I think, and that's it becomes a little bit more complex than to say I'd like to say I had a pretty good career there.
Yeah.
I've been loved since I've been back, and I think my class was kind of the last bit that had some success there, and also, showed a lot of respect to the Trojan past, where times had then changed essentially right after me in our class in 2020 or 2021. So it's interesting, and I know I'm rambling here, but it's gonna make sense here in a second. But I get back quite a bit to SC, and I talk to some of the players, and I say, look, I understand you want to run around and you want to find time to play, and you want to be on the field, like that's important. But at the end of the day, life comes at you quick. You may be done with the game of football really fast. Like I was done with it really fast, and being at USC is something you should be proud of, because at the end of the day, you're going to have people that are looking out for you. And if you show this university respect, and you show, love for being, wearing cardinal and gold, your life is going to be significantly different. Because, there's Fortune 500 CEOs, we used to joke about it all the time, but it was always told us, go to class, because you never know who you'll be sitting next to. You'll never know who you might come across, and you make a relationship, a friend somewhere, and all of a sudden he or she is running, $1 billion company, and you need a job. So, that's the kind of place that it is. So, I think it's forever changed how people look at what it's like to be a Trojan, and across universities all over the place.
I think you just said something that's going to help a lot of our P4 S&C coaches, whether it's football, basketball, the coaches where they're battling, in air quotes, anybody that's not watching, battling the athletes that maybe don't want to actually go to class because they're like, well, you know what, coach, I signed my NIL not to go to class. But when you actually take a step back and you start to notice some of the really successful athletes, musicians, whatever, they are great at that thing. And because they're so competitive and so obsessed, they have a side hustle. And yeah, let's call school your side hustle, but you get to go and you can learn about, like you said, football will end. It'll end in 1, 3, 5. Who knows? It's going to end. And what are you going to do at that point? Because sure, you could have gobs of money, but how are you going to make sure you have it for your family, give it to other people in need, and be responsible with it? But if you have nothing to do and you do nothing for a while, as two former football players, like, you eventually want to find a new passion. So why not find a new passion, like you just said, where you could have been rubbing elbows with who knows, and now you have a great trajectory and something that you really care about. And you have to be there anyways. What else are you going to do with the day? There's only so much, video games you can play.
Yeah. It took me a few years to like, not regret that, but like there was periods at USC. I think it's hard because you can sit there and say, as now a 29-year-old, I can go up to 18-year-olds and say, go to class, man. Like you'll at some point you'll wish you did. It's hard to tell that because I was the same way. Like we used to joke about it a lot. This is probably not the best thing for me to say, but we used to joke and say we didn't come here to play school. Like that was not
my thing was nobody's paying to watch me take a test or anybody, right? Like,
yeah. So it's one of those things where like it does take time for it to sink in. Like, man, I should have gone to school, or it takes. At the end of the day, it's a lot of work, man. To be a student athlete is really difficult. Yes, and some people don't understand that. They constantly want to criticize student athletes and they constantly want to do this, but it's a really, really demanding life. And it is not easy. Especially, like my freshman year, we were practicing in the morning. We were on the field at 7:45, 8 o'clock in the morning. Then I have to go straight to class. And it's like, that is really hard. Or, towards the end of my career, we'd practice in the afternoon, and then I had a 6 to 9 p.m. class, and it's like, no, I don't want to go to. That's 3 hours that I just spent, and it's in the middle of the season, so it's like I'm sitting in there in class most of the time just watching film, because at the end of the day, like that was, getting an A or a C in that class wasn't necessarily going to make or break my forever life, but playing well on Saturday could, right? And that's where things get really hard, is when you start to juggle and understand, where do I give my time? Because again, you have an opportunity in front of you. If you play good ball for 2 to 4 years, 1 to 4 years, like you could set yourself up good. But again, getting an A or a C, obviously if you're failing classes, that's unacceptable, but getting an A or a C, no one's going to hire you based off that one class if you got an A or a C, so unless you're pre-med or something, but it's a really, really hard job, and people don't quite understand it if you've never lived it.
No. And you kind of talk about it before, you've talked about it on your socials, where like you learn how to exceed and succeed at a high level because you were kind of forced to it. The question that I'm getting at here is, our strength coaches, let's call it what it is, 99% of them did not have the physical ability, myself included, to play at a school that level, that good. Now, there are, again, about 99% that have never worked in an environment like a USC, where there's the lineage and the history and the tradition of excellence. PlayerData is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for GPS technology, and it's simple. The price you cannot beat, and the validity and accuracy of their technology is second to none. The price is outstanding. Go ahead and reach out to them to learn more about the pricing specific to you and however many units you're going to get. And then the validity. PlayerData has been tested and run through FIFA's validation process for FIFA to then be utilizing PlayerData technology. FIFA, we all know that name. They would not be utilizing a product that cannot live up to the competition and cannot be able to provide real, live, and accurate data. PlayerData is able to do this. Not only do they have great software and hardware, but I know that the customer service is fantastic because I have worked with these individuals before. Click the link down below to learn more about PlayerData. You have been in those weight rooms. You have been in those locker rooms. I want you to talk about it for the strength coaches that are listening, who maybe just got hired to go work at a place like that. And they're like, man, I'm working at X university. This is how to avoid imposter syndrome, how to embrace working at a place like that. And then also to give it some perspective to those strength coaches that maybe are aspiring to it and whatnot, but just to hear it from the horse's mouth of what it's like, so they can assimilate properly and do really well in that environment before they even start coaching athletes or coaches.
Yeah, I think life, no matter where you are, the number one rule of succeeding somewhere is being authentic, right? Being genuine, is being who you are. I think of three people in my time at USC. Ivan Lewis, who's now I forget his director of strength and conditioning or director of performance for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
Danny Van Dyke.
It's like the entire Seahawks staff was USC actually right now.
Yes. And then Danny Van Dyke, who is a brilliant, he's from Australia. He was at USC for 4 years. He's now like they kind of have a joint role up there. He's brilliant human being. And then Coach Torrey, he's at the University of Texas, head strength coach. Torrey Beckton, yes. So the three of them, Torrey was only there for a year, but between Ivan, Danny, and Torrey, and then obviously many others, Mark and Tim Ojeda, and some of these guys that really contributed to, and Josh, that just contributed to a team there. Being at USC, you're full of the locker room is full of very, very different personalities and different types of people, different backgrounds, different everything. And what I appreciated so much about the group that they had there was everyone kind of had the ability to speak to a different set of groups, right? Tori back then at the time he kind of had this, he's a very intense human being, like, but I just loved watching him work, kind of establish this culture, where we had some trouble, some guys that were struggling and just couldn't quite, they needed a little bit more tough, kind of a helicopter type human being to like keep them on par and moving forward. He was very genuine. He was very authentic. He was who he was every single day. Same person every single day. And Ivan really had this kind of more laid back approach of, he spoke to me really well, where he knew that I didn't need that helicoptering. I was going to show up and I was going to work out and I was going to do my thing every single day at 100 miles per hour. And he had this ability to again, just be himself with a select group of people, right? Not everyone's going to respond the same way to the same type of, same style of coaching. And then Danny was just this brilliant human being that kind of did the same thing, contributed to certain people. So what I say for people that are walking into to a big role for the first time is never change, right? Never, you can obviously evolve and grow, but be who you are from day one. And whether it's the laid back approach or the bulldog, if you are authentic and genuine at the end of the day, these kids will respect it and they'll appreciate it. The last thing that you want is for them to smell that you're being fake, because that does not go well. And so, that part of being genuine and authentic, but I think the next part is hiring people, right? Is building your team around you that speaks differently than you, that does different things than you. Then, it's about this overall, this circle of unique and they got to fit every single mold. And so obviously that's a lot easier said than done. I think that's in life, whether you're the CEO of some company or, just a manager, whatever, like hiring and firing people is really difficult, and finding the right people is tough, but I think it drives success at the end of the day. So it's all about, to me, again, like I said, it's all about being who you are, no matter what, all the time. And just loving the fact, like, if you are who you are, and you respect these kids and you show them support and love, like, you're going to have a good chance of succeeding.
To the strength coaches out there that are just trying to copy and paste what their boss is doing, hopefully what he just said rings true to you, because you cannot just copy and paste and try to just parrot whatever the person above you is saying.
Well, and I think it's easy, especially if you watch somebody have success before you. It's easy to say, I'm just going to do exactly what they did. But at the end of the day, that's, that can be a major mistake, because, if it rains to be, or if these kids smell that it's not you and you're just trying to fit the exact mold because you don't want to skip a beat or whatever, as time goes on, it could become detrimental. Because again, if you can't prove to be the same person every single day, and you have days where you slip back into who you really are, and then the next day is performative and you're trying to be like somebody else, it won't go over well. And also, I don't think you'll last very long, right? If you can't be the same person and you have to fake it, that becomes energy draining and really hard to be consistent.
Conversely, talk to the coaches that out there are, hey, I'm talking to Cam the same way that I talk to Justin, not the coach that understood I need to MF everybody. I don't need to MF Cam. But the minute you do, so to that coach that treats everybody the same and doesn't actually understand how to connect with and talk to the different coaches, talk to them real quick about the damage that they're doing to their own reputation, how they're not going to get the buy-in that they want and ultimately the success that they're looking for.
I thought about when you asked that question, I think back to Clay Helton. He would come up to me before. I mean, I was a 2-time captain. I was a 4-year starter. I was a grown man there, and towards the end, when him and I had a really good relationship, he would say, "Hey, just so you know, he would either say, hey, I'm going to call on you, make sure you're ready to answer this question. Or he would say, hey, I'm going to try and make an example out of you. Like he would either say it's not personal, or it's like, it's not even true. You're the one who I know can take it for right now. So he understood, because if he did and he called me out just to call me out, I'd be like, what the fuck, coach? Like, that was unnecessary. You know, you can come up to me and speak to me like a grown man. You don't need to call me out and kind of diminish me. But talking again, there are people, when I looked around the locker room, and became a hard part about USC, is like, you had kids from all over the country. You had kids from Orange County, wealthy, high income parents getting into USC, whatever, or you had kids from Florida that were, just from a different background, or, from the South, or from, South Central Los Angeles. You had people from all over the place. And some of them aren't as mentally tough as the others. And I also think about this from Mike Zimmer's perspective. When I played for Mike Zimmer, and I was thinking about this situation that came up. I'm coaching an 8th grade team right now, and I'm having a blast doing it. But there was my second preseason game. I missed a sack as a rookie, and he came off and he said, Cam, you need to make that play. And I'm like, you don't think I know that? Like, thanks for that. But like, he just immediately, I had a down play, and I came off to the sideline, and he kicked me while I was down. I was like, that was just unnecessary, right? Just a young kid trying to figure it out. And it just felt like he was just that guy who was going to coach everybody the same way.
Hawkin Dynamics is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Not only am I using it now in the private sector at Goldfinch, I was utilizing this software when I was back at Towson University. You're able to transport the plates, because I've taken them from our private sector facility to our other locations. Also been able to take it from our private in-person location to the high school down the road to do some testing with athletes right then and there. You're able to pair your true strength with the striking difference machine. The people at Hawkin are fantastic. The technology is second to none. You have to learn more about Hawkin Dynamic in the link down below.
And there, you can find people that will appreciate that, where you're not going to treat, the whatever. But I just, at the end of the day, I feel it's everybody. In my opinion, you're going to get the best out of anybody when they have confidence, right? The best that they're going to play, the best that they're going to operate is when they feel confident on the field, and or have some juice behind them. And if that juice comes from, absolutely loving up on people to allow them to be confident and know that, like, hey, I might make a mistake, but I'm not going to get, screwed over because of it. Or you might have the guy who needs to be called out to come out and have something to prove almost. So I think coaching the same people, or everybody similarly or the same, I think is equally detrimental as being a fraud. Because at the end of the day, most of the time you have 105 guys that are no one's the same. And that just becomes an issue. If you start favoring people, that's a whole different issue. But, in terms of how you speak to them, how you correct them, and how you coach them, you can't do it all the same. In my opinion, you have to find the ability to be intuitive and understand how each person thinks and believes and accepts coaching.
To our listeners out there, that we just explained to you the two ditches to fall in. Everybody's the exact same, and I just coach everybody like this, and the ditch of I need to copy what the person above me did. You need to be your authentic self, and you need to communicate with people the way that you know them, and those are harder than the first two. It's harder to actually authentically know your own self and invest time in understanding who you are, what makes you tick, how you like to do things. And then it's also harder to invest time to understand, like, hey, I want to understand this person, who these group of athletes are. And this is something that the late Kurt Hester talked about in his book, where he actually gave coaches a list of, like, hey, these are the 20 questions that I ask the incoming players so I can understand who they are and get a good idea. Because like you said, where he was working at La Tech, he had kids from all over, down Louisiana with dirt poor nothing to kids that could afford it. And that's why they came down to the school, because they wanted to play football and they had the money to be able to play it. So it's like, you have it, but you have to make the investment, which don't get into coaching strength and conditioning if you're not willing to do it. Just get out of it. It's not going to work for you.
Absolutely.
For you, so you talked about the Minnesota Vikings, and within that as well, how did so you were successful, 2-year captain, 4-year starter at SC. How did you take the success that got you there and understood that, hey, what got me here isn't what's going to help me get success at the NFL, so that way you had to learn a new set of skills, but you still had to be the same person, right? You had to, and this comes back to a coach I work with where he said, I'm trying to learn how to be a new version of me and improve, but not forget the things that I did to help me get where I was. And I asked that for you to explain to our listeners so that way they can apply whenever they're getting promotions, working in new jobs, new situations, where they can still draw on the well that helped them be who they were, but thrive in their new setting, new situation.
I think I've looked back at that quite a bit. Like, why was my time at USC different than my time at Minnesota? Not to blame, like, I'm not here trying to blame anybody. But I've kind of taken a look at why I handled things differently. And it all came back down to who was guiding me. I committed to Steve Sarkisian and Peter Sirmon and Justin Wilcox at USC. Peter Sirmon was when I speak about that person who gave me confidence, it was like I truly felt like I could do no wrong, but in the best way possible. Like, I just played free. I played confident. I played like like every day I wasn't walking out there like praying not to lose my job, not to get cut, not to do whatever. And the way that he coached me was hard. He communicated really well to me, but he also gave me, again, all that belief in myself that I'm a heck of a football player and I can go out there and do whatever I wanted to do. And when I got to Minnesota, I was, I think I was actually coming off. I had been banged up my senior year. I missed like 3 games, but it was in my opinion the best football that I had ever played. Was my senior year. I was flying around. I was light. I was really, really understood the game. I knew exactly what I heard from many people, like, how do you know what we're running? Like, a couple of linemen would come to me and say, why are you yelling out every single play that we're running? Like, I just really felt confident on the field, and Clancy Pendergrass did that same thing for me too. But when I got to Minnesota, it just was different. I was really lacking confidence. I was not playing very well. And it was the first time that I had ever not been, the starting linebacker. I walked in and Eric Kendricks was making $10 million a year and Anthony Barr was making $12 million a year. And we had a really good room with Ben Gideon and Eric Wilson. These guys were playing really, really high level football. And ultimately the way that I was being coached, the way that I was, being talked to, the way that I was, also my own self, I obviously, I'm not trying to point the finger at everybody else, but it became in my understanding, it had a lot to do with, again, how I was being coached and not quite understanding to me. And so, like I said, I played with really a lot of self-doubt. I was questioning myself. I was questioning every decision I made. I was making mistakes, which I was never a guy that made mistakes. And so I could only really contribute that to the environment that I was in to some degree. It became difficult. So to your question, I think you kind of asked it as if I did handle it correctly. And I'd say I didn't. I'd say I at the end of the day, I really struggled. And it was me wanting to be the same person that I was at SC because I was playing really good football, to ultimately saying and realizing to myself that I wasn't, that I was trying to be different. I was being coached different, and I wasn't ultimately living up to who I'd been in the past.
let's say the strength coach right now, he's listening to this and he's like, you know what? I can see a senior from high school who's now with us in college, or a transfer, or there's the pro strength coach that's listening and saying, hey, we got this, rookie, and he seems different than what we've talked about. What would be your 2 cents, your word of advice to that strength coach that could see that younger you struggling? What would you tell him to tell that athlete to be able to help him thrive?
I don't think it's a one-time conversation. I think it's over a period of time. Ultimately, with whether it's a transfer, whether it's a young kid coming in, again, going back to so much of it can be the environment. Like, people have come, I'll just use my own, perspective and what I know, but people had come to USC and had never been out of the South, had never been out of their hometown, and here they are in Los Angeles, and it becomes really overwhelming. It becomes, hard to navigate. You have people pulling you in all kinds of different directions, what parties to go to, let's go down to Santa Monica, all these things that becomes a lot. And for kids that had, we had a couple of kids that grew up in Alaska, on the islands of Hawaii or whatever. And it's like, LA is different from those places. And ultimately, the realization of looking at some of these people and just understanding that their environment has changed, and maybe they may be very uncomfortable at home. They may have some struggles going on. Maybe, who knows what's going on at home with, family or whatever. But then again, just being around new coaches, new people, having to compete really hard for the first time, and again, having a lot on their plate where they're going to school. Maybe they have professors or whoever's coming at them, expecting and demanding more, and they're not quite able to give it. I feel like it's a consistent, the way that you speak to people, the way that you speak to this kid of like, hey man, everything's going to be just fine. Keep grinding, just keep taking deep breaths, like whatever I can do to help. You're doing a good job. I think it's those types of reassurance that, like, if you give them confidence, you might see it. Like I said, you might see a totally different player, because they now feel like, they have the opportunities to be who they are. And if they keep making the same mistakes, that's obviously a hard thing to do. Like, you can't really coach that. But I don't know if it's necessarily just one conversation of how do you speak to this kid to get him out of that, because ultimately I think it takes time, and they have to feel trust in you. I think a lot of these kids are not very trustworthy, or they don't give trust very easily. And I think it just takes time to create a relationship and allow them to feel like this guy's got my back, and I'm going to be okay. Like, that's, again, these kids are they're I think more now you're seeing this generation be pretty soft and tender, and like, no one really is responding very well to these MFers that, want to just absolutely dog on them. I think that day and age is over.
And I would say, getting back to what we talked about earlier, it just takes that authentic you, the person that's taking time to get to know people, and you're now giving that person safety to express who they are and be that individual that the organization brought in for whatever reason, because now they feel that the people care about them, so they can go and be the person that everybody thought they could be.
100%. 100%.
And that doesn't boil down to, that again goes back to our job is, connecting with the athletes to be able to allow you, right? Your strength coaches, they were the ones that connected and recognized, hey, Cam does this well, or can't, like, even in your pro day prep, all of the things to help you have a successful pro day. It was, okay, Cam, now we need to switch and transition to focusing on X, Y, or Z, so it can translate to your draft day, so it can translate to a better, ultimate draft result, so you can have the success that you want.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that draft, pro day prep, and all of those things for our strength coaches that are going through it now. It's on the tail end of it, right? The combine's over. Most pro days are over. what are things that stood out to you with conversations? Because we know the drills, we know what they are. Powerlift is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for exercise equipment. Made here in the USA, right down the road in the state of Iowa, Powerlift has the ability to customize whatever you need in your room, regardless of the sector of strength and conditioning. If you need a massive, big room, they have the ability to help you with that. If you're confined with space and you need to get creative, their reps are able to help you get what you need done and being able to get any customizations that you or your organization want with your logo on the equipment. Click the link down below to learn more about Powerlift. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to reach out to us. Like, that's not going to change. But conversations with organizations and things that you learned along the way that you think would be important for athletes to know, so that way they can hear it through you now, or for the strength coach to hear it and be able to give that piece of advice to them.
You're saying conversations with, like, through the
different
process?
Agents and like different the different scouts from different organizations, or when people are bringing you in and they're trying to ask you about X, Y, or Z, the mental game that these scouts and these teams will play with people to try to gauge and figure out where, because we understand that there's a big mental side of the entirety of sport, regardless of which sport you play.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was a couple conversations that I had with people, coaches, scouts, agents, that still, there was a lot that I've now, it's been a long time since those days. And I don't, not every conversation is really stands out, but I had a guy from Dallas called me. It was a couple days before the draft. Actually, it was like late in the process. And he had like instantly gone into this period of like, I feel like you don't like football. That's what he said to me. He's like, I feel like you don't like football. I was like, oh, why do you say that? And he goes, you don't play with any passion. And I go, what do you mean? He's like, there's no like hoopla from you. There's no this. And I go, listen. I said, I had a lot on my plate at middle linebacker for USC. Pretty much every single down for 70 downs, I had one of the corners or one of the safeties yelling at me 5 seconds before this ball was about to get snapped and asked me for a call. I had to make every single check. I had to line up our entire defensive line. I had to make all the communications on the back end. We had, some smart guys out there, but I said, for the most part, I was making every single call. I didn't have the time to do the hoopla, the talking smack, the this and then that. It's like, I was so focused on my responsibility that if you think that I don't love football, then you haven't talked to anybody about me. Because ultimately, I spent more time in the film room than anybody else on our team. It's like, you don't do that if you don't love football. And just because I show it differently, that doesn't mean I don't love it. And I felt that was an instant thing from his perspective of saying, I'm going to call this guy out. Again, I have no idea why he ever said that I didn't like football, or didn't seem like I didn't like football, but it felt like it was more, because I had never heard that from anybody else, but it felt like it was more to try and get a reaction out of me. And so, but at the end of the day, I think through the process of what you're talking about, trying to, the mind games, I think the system as a whole does that to you without these people trying to create mind games. The Senior Bowl was probably the worst week of my life, still to this day. Like the most challenging, the most demanding. We had the Raiders staff, and they absolutely, this was when John Gruden was there, and they just loved the cameras. We met at 6 a.m. every day. We were doing meetings at 2 a.m., till 2 a.m. doing, it was so demanding. And then to throw in practice and one-on-ones and all this, cameras are there. No one needed to ask me anything or talk to me about anything to play the mind games with me. It was already going on, right? I was already exhausted. I was so mentally over it. And then I would say the combine was the same way, right? Like I think that year, the linebackers were the last group to go. So I was there for, 4 or 5 days doing interviews. And obviously it's the same for everybody, but it felt like it just was like this thing that dragged on, and you had this to perform at the highest level. And it's such a daunting process as a whole. And then let alone you start throwing in interviews and people want to talk to you about football and how much knowledge you know of the game. And those were always the conversations that I actually quite enjoyed, because I felt like my understanding of football was at a high level. So it was always good for me. But yeah, it's, ultimately I think there's a lot on these kids' plates, and I had one conversation with Adam Zimmer and Nick Rallis. I remember at the Senior Bowl, the linebacker coaches for Minnesota. I never thought I was going to be a Viking, and all of a sudden they draft me in the 5th round, and it's like, oh, okay. Well, they have a stacked room, and here we go. So ultimately, I think this might be more of a topic to the players, but I'm recognizing that, like, if your film is good enough and you're a normal human being, like, there's not a whole lot that you can really control beyond that point of playing good football and being, not saying weird things in your meetings, and you're pretty much going to be, it's already slotted for you where you're going. And it's just, the whole process is so funky, and ultimately, like, I think there's it's a pretty wild ride.
Getting to, when you're talking there at the end about, like, knowing and being able to play fast and have good tape, and essentially, like, the die is cast by doing that. It made me think about John Griffith, who's at the Atlanta Falcons, where he talked to his players like, guys, get in your film, get in your playbook and understand. And once you do that, you don't need to keep coming to me and learning and asking what speed drills, like, you're fast, you're strong. Yeah, we'll go do them, but you're going to play faster when you're in your playbook and you are confident because you're not doubting yourself. You have any of that other stuff that you alluded to.
Well, and that's a big thing for me too, is this whole emphasis on how quote unquote athletic you are in shorts. There was a lot of players, like, I was not a tester. I've never been a tester. Like, combines were my kryptonite, because I wasn't going to be the guy who ran a 4.4. I did end up jumping out of the gym. I jumped like a 38.5, but which is like, it was great for me. But ultimately, the position drills were I thrived in. I feel like I was fluid enough. But ultimately, I watched my film, and I'd watch other people's film who quote unquote were more athletic than me, and I'd be like, dude, I'm taking a step before they're even moving. Like, I'm gone already. I already know where the play's going. You running a 4.4 in shorts, but playing like a 4.8 in pads. It's like, I don't move on from this like 40-yard dash emphasis. Obviously, there's some people who need to be faster than others, but it's like, I'd rather run the 40-yard dash laterally as a linebacker, because that's how you're going to move. What if you're the linebacker is the one chasing down a receiver 30 yards down the field, like, the rest of your DBs need help, because we shouldn't be the ones, that's just an effort play at the end of the day. So ultimately, I look at the workout in shorts like, what's the point in this? This is so unnecessary. At the end of the day, if you can't see how fast somebody is in the game, then figure it out. And I think, to your point, like, it doesn't, how athletic you are at some positions, obviously, like, it's more important than others. But if you know ball, like, I think to a guy like Harrison Smith, who at 35 years old, 36 years old, 14 years in the league, and he's pretty much made the last probably 7 years of his career has strictly been off of his brain, just understanding the game. Never been the most athletic out there. He's a freak, but he has gotten to the point to where he makes his moves and he navigates the field so much more efficiently and effectively because of how much ball he knows and how well he's studied and thrived. Because again, he's not the 21-year-old freak athlete anymore. He's just a vet, and he just understands ball.
I think you were early to it, but you would have loved the guy, Tony Villani, who is Travis Kelce. He's worked with Anquan, Chris Carter, like a lot of just unbelievable pro athletes, and something that he had coined. And some people are going to try to steal and say that it was theirs before Tony, but what Tony's been talking about is game speed, where it's that whole notion of get your first step, be faster than everybody else. Sure. He said speed is like a gun. You want to have it on you. You want to show people that you know how to use it. You can display it multiple ways, but once you pull that gun out of the holster and you got to fire the bullet, there's no coming back. Essentially, in football, when you're hitting that max velo, you can't really change direction well because of how high your thigh is separated from the ground, and track sprint is different than a football sprint. And he's helping coaches understand how to coach athletes at that 88 to 93% speed, but being fast and controlled and learning how to get a step on somebody in the field, to linebackers, deflect the ball, intercept the ball, versus tight ends, wide receivers, whatever, catching said pass and then being fast. Vitruve is the trusted VBT source for Strength Coach Network, and I have been utilizing this for years at Goldfinch, and I'm going to continue to utilize it because the great price for the encoder, as well as the accuracy with the data. Whether I'm measuring average, peak, or any other metric, if I want to include range of motion, fatigue loss during the set, interest set, whatever it is, I can trust Vitruve. And they are continuing to push the needle and continuing to educate coaches on best practices within the VBT world. Not only do they live in that VBT world, but now they've come out with their new hub. And if you want to learn more about the hub and how it can help you with all of your athletes that you are working with, as we are starting to do this at Goldfinch for our middle school all the way up to college athletes, check them out in the link down below. And then the final thing that he has talked about is, game speed is being Vin Diesel in Fast and the Furious, brake, clutch, reaccelerate, versus a drag race car. And we all know what the sport of football really is. So building better athletes that do that. Yep. People like him have been coaches that we've been getting behind, and other people that do it, to try to help athletes understand how to be successful and what really does drive the needle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think it is again, the ideas, and again, going back to coaching these 8th graders, I'll stand behind some of the linebackers and I'll talk about, what I'm seeing, and saying like, you see the running back is offset away from you. The tight end is here. That line, if that ball goes to you, that line is going to travel. So you don't need to be 100 miles an hour outside and then you overrun the ball. And then, it's beyond you. It's like, that's where I think it's not about how fast you move from A to B. It's about efficiently knowing, okay, that line's going to slide to me. I can be real slow here. And that ball most likely is going to come back, and I feel that running back, and there I am. It's like I never moved about 50% because all I did was just slowly trail. It's like show me where I had full speed 40-yard dash movement right there. Never. I was 50%. I just understood the blind's going to move, and you react to it. And it's, again, every position is different, and I can only speak in the positions that I've played, but there's way too much of an emphasis on. Look at going back to even receivers, like going back to some of the people, an Anquan Bolden, for example, or even a Travis Kelce, obviously, has made a living off of catching footballs, but those guys aren't the most athletic. Larry Fitzgerald, like they just did things more efficiently and better than everybody else. And they're now going to be Hall of Famers. And it's like, there's just way too much of an emphasis on how fast you can run from A to B when realistically you're never going to do that.
Tony has said, he's like, Anquan and Chris. He's like, I got these two guys. No, he said he had Darrell Revis and Anquan Bolden. They were doing work together because that they would go and train with him. And so this is all, from Tony telling me now telling you and everybody listening, but they've heard Tony say this before, is Darrell Revis and Anquan Bolden are saying like, no, Tony, if I'm sprinting on the field, I've lost. Like if I need to be under control. Otherwise, that receiver is going to run by me. Darrell Revis is telling, and Tony's like, wait a minute, like that's not what I've been taught. Like that doesn't. And so it took him a while to understand it. But if you're sprinting on that field, you've already lost versus being fast, being smooth, being forceful, put your foot in the ground and accelerate.
Yeah. Well, there was my senior year. I had a hamstring injury. I pulled it in practice. And I came back a week early. And I said, if I really have to put my hamstring to use in this game, then something happened. Something's wrong because, and what I did was I hardly ever really pushed it because I knew where I was going.
Dasher Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for timing gates for your athletes. Whether you're trying to run A-cells, curve, flies, change in direction with the Pro Agility, the 505, modified 505, whatever you want to do, get valid and reliable setup with your Dasher. I had the black, the blue, and now we have the silver at Goldfinch. We're completely moving over from the blues to just only having the silvers. I only test my athletes on the silvers because it has helped me save so much time, whether I'm going from Ankeny over to Nevada or Ankeny over to Huxley, whatever I got to do. I save so much time, and I want you to be able to save so much time with your setup because we know that time is precious as strength coaches. Now, not only are you going to be able to save time, but you're going to be able to save money with this great product, and you have a valid and reliable product that has run through countless different articles as you continue to see online being published with the accuracy of this information. So, If you want to learn more about Dasher, click the link down below to be able to go to their website and learn more about them.
I knew where the ball was going. I just studied extra hard that week, and I understood where they were going, 95% of the time, and I played just within my limits to keep my hamstring intact and not have to put too much stress on it. It's like that's I think the best football players in the league and so on and so forth have the ability to understand, like, I can just move about 75% most of the time and be just fine.
You teed up the next question about injuries, return to play. You had the heart stuff. Let's talk about, we'll get to that at the end, but let's talk about any of the return to play process and stuff that you understand or what you remember, because strength coaches just heard you say there, hey, I was physically limited, so I used my psychological preparation to know where to go, to technically play better as linebacker, to tactically attack the field defensively better. And so the classic example there was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady were better cerebrally, better than they were physically versus the Mike Vick and the scrambling quarterbacks that make them good. Talk about your remembrance of any injuries that you had, and then how strength and conditioning helped in that return to play process, so our coaches can try to learn and pick your brain on certain things there.
Yeah, I think so. I tore my ACL my freshman year at SC, and being in LA, the fortunate piece of that is Neil Elatrosh did my ACL, world renowned, one of the greatest to ever do it, and then John Meyer did my physical therapy. Again, also one of the greatest to ever do it. And, John Meyer is one of the most intelligent people that I've ever been with. And same with, again, going back to Danny and and Ivan and some of the help that I had on the strength and conditioning side. But, I'm obviously not a sports scientist, and I've taken ownership and understanding more about my body and understanding more about different styles of strength and conditioning as a whole. Especially in the league, you get to kind of branch around and do your own thing. You have some guys that are doing a lot more functional type workouts and more plyometrics, and because again, that's a little bit more some of the movements from a football player that you're going to have, less of just your power cleans and your back squats, right? Although I love to back squat, I'm all for throwing a bar on my back, but you're not, they require different parts of your body that you don't always use in football. It actually makes it more explosive and stronger as a whole, but doing things where, like I trained with a guy in Sacramento, his name is Billy White, out of his group is U Functional. And he was putting me through some of the most funky workouts where, again, my upper body and my lower body are working, differently. And it just creates a little bit more of a athletic demand where you're just forced to be athletic to handle it. And I really always appreciated the workouts that we got to do. But from a physical therapy and just a, return to play, I don't know if I can speak too much on,
I'm not looking for you to be like, hey, hey, these were some things that like I really remember. Like this was a memorable story, and just because again, hearing it from the player's perspective, if you're the one that we're trying to help get back onto the field, and like whether there's value in the coaches that even just heard you say like, hey, I wasn't 100%, but I knew how to kind of avoid and do certain things so I could still ultimately play. So even just hearing those anecdotal stories is just so powerful and helpful for these coaches.
I think what people have to understand from a player's perspective is the hardest part about being injured is being alone. Mentally, you're not a part of the team. You don't oftentimes get to travel. While everyone's in meetings and they're working on the next week, you're in the training facility getting rehab. It's a very lonely process, and I think if you can handle that mentally. And that's why I think you see a lot of older guys that get hurt. And I think sometimes, I was talking to Eric Kendricks, who we played together in Minnesota. And I was joking with him. I said, how many more years do you have left? Like 10? And he goes, Cam, if I can play if I can play 4 to 5 games a year, I could last another 5 years. So it was this idea, and he was saying, like, he goes, all I did, he got picked up by San Francisco last year towards the late half, just their playoff stretch. And he goes, there was one game where I had 2 reps at Sam, and the rest of the time I played special teams. And he goes, I came off the field and I was like, wow, what a great, I feel so good. So my point is some of these older guys that get hurt and they don't feel like they're threatened, like someone's going to come in and take their job, or like a lot of them look at it like, cool, I get a couple weeks to get my body right in other places. So it's the younger guys that feel like, shoot, I might lose my job now that I'm hurt, or I have to be alone, and it's my first time really being alone in a new city. It's going back to understanding who these people are, yes, and what their threats are, and who, where they stand mentally and emotionally. Because ultimately, I think if you can handle that psychological side of being injured well, odds are you're going to come back better, healthier, stronger, faster, all those other things. But when you're like mentally and emotionally damaged because of it, and your home life is hard and you're away from all the people, I think at the end of the day, from a therapy side of things, physical therapy side of things, like you almost become somewhat of an emotional support person too. Like in that part of it, some people don't want to do that and they don't feel like they have to do that, but it is a big part of whether or not somebody comes back, better than they were before, because of, it's a tough thing to handle.
So you again just said something there that I don't think you appreciate the value of it, but understanding the difference in when an older player versus a younger player gets injured and the different mindset that they'd be going into it, like that right there is a gold nugget for these coaches when they're working with people to understand, yes, the individual, but where they're coming from and what they're trying to get back to. So that's golden right there.
Yeah, no, it's being injured sucks no matter what. And yeah, it's, I did everything I could to always be on the field or around it, even when I had open heart surgery. I'm sure you're going to want to jump into that here soon, but even when I got open heart surgery, I remember Daniil Hunter, who obviously is a freak athlete, an absolute beast, but him and he had gotten injured that year too and was out for the season. And he ended up going home. He was working out in Houston where he lived and all that stuff. He had totally separated himself from the team, just went and got some time to himself. I was around the facility every single day in 2020. Open heart surgery, was never going to play. I went to every single practice because that's what I needed for myself. I needed to still feel like I was a part of the team, because if I had missed a whole year after the first time of my life of not being a starter, going away, letting them forget about me, I would have been emotionally and physically like, I might get cut, and I don't want them to give me that, or, I don't want to give them that reason to do so. So I was around making sure that I had contributed in some way, somehow, so that they remembered that I was still there, and they remembered that I was coming back. And again, just different places where D was a $20 million guy, had proved himself already, and he felt like, I'm going to go home and get time to myself because I need it. And I've honestly earned it, where I was sitting there like, I don't know what happens if I go home for 5 months, 6 months, don't see him until OTAs the following year. Like that could be detrimental to me. And so, yeah, it was just, again, going back to people are different, and parts of me wonders like if I would have had, been away and kind of regrouped a little bit more, if I would have handled it differently coming back. But ultimately it was, it is how it was, it is how it is.
So talk about that experience with the open heart surgery. We don't always have things like that, but for strength coaches to be exposed to hearing about it, I've always joked around with the head, the heart, and the heat are 3 things that strength coaches, we can't be messing. Like you got to be on your P's and Q's and really understand when you're returning somebody from an injury with a concussion, when it's really hot outside, you better have all of your procedures in place to make sure that they are covered and they're safe. And then also we always had athletes have to get EKGs and heart testing and stress testing before they trained. Talk about why all of that is important, and talk about your story and what happened.
Yeah. So it was the COVID year in 2020. I had where you had to test negative 3 times to get into camp to do your physical. So on the first time, I had a presumptive positive test, and then I went negative, negative, negative after that. So I assumed it was essentially a false positive.
Yep.
I went in. The NFL demanded you get MRI and just further testing on your heart, because I think at the time they thought that COVID was a big contributor to heart issues. So I went in, got my MRI done, came back to the facility, and I had, we EKGs they happen all the time. You get them in every physical, at the combine, lots of EKGs being done. Ultimately, those aren't the most. I don't know. I don't really even know what they tell you ultimately. Just like heart arrhythmia, maybe.
Yeah, and like the normal rhythm of the heart.
Yeah. So came back, got my MRI done, came back to the facility. Eric Sugarman, who was the head trainer at the time, he's like, "Hey, you need to go get an echocardiogram right now." So everything all right? He's like, "Yeah, just go. We'll talk later." I was like, "Okay."
Could you be more specific?
Yeah. And he's like, just go get it done. We'll talk when you get back. Go get the echocardiogram done. By the time we get back to the facility, I walk into the trainer's office, and there was the head doctor, Eric Sugarman. I think Rick Spillman was in there. Mike Zimmer was in there. Like, everybody was in there. And they had said, like, so your heart's 3 times the size of a normal heart. You have a bicuspid aortic valve, and blood is regurgitating back into your heart. And I was like, okay, like, he's like, we're going to send you to go see the cardiologist right now and kind of talk about what the next steps are. So I went to see the cardiologist in Minneapolis, and we had kind of started talking, and she's like, yeah, so football's going to be done for you. And we're going to put you on a mechanical valve, or put a mechanical valve inside of you, and you'll be on blood thinners for the rest of your life. And I was like, that seems like very by the books, not for my life. I'm a 21, I think I was a 21-year-old at the time. Like, you're going to put me on blood thinners for the rest of my life? Like, that doesn't seem, so I have one slip and fall. I like to hunt. I like to do a lot of outdoors things. I'm like, you're going to one slip and fall and I'm dead. It seems a little bit extreme. So the story had kind of blown up, and I was on the Today Show, and just kind of like had been the first person with, or not, there's been another guy, and I'll bring him up in a second, but I had gotten a call from a former player who played in Philadelphia for 16 years, and then he was a long snapper, finished his career in like New Orleans or something like that. He had the same issue as me, but he had also like a big clot too. So he was a little bit older than I. So he called me up and said, "There's one guy you need to see. That's it. I'm going to give him your number, and he's going to do your surgery." I was like, okay, like I'll definitely hear him out. And he gets on. We Zoom. I don't feel like it's necessary for me to share his name, but we get on a Zoom, and he starts talking to me, and I'm having trouble like communicating with him. He seemed a little bit, like he's just a savant, so to speak. And he goes, "I've put baseball players back on the field, on the diamond. I've put fighter pilots back in their jets. I've put basketball players back on the field. Like, I have never put a football player back on the field. And that's my goal." So to me, it was like, okay, this is kind of a feather in your hat. You're going to probably use me as like a little puppet here, but whatever. Like, that to me was better than hearing you're going to have a mechanical valve and be on blood thinners for the rest of your life. So I got to Philadelphia at UPenn. And so I was born with a bicuspid aortic valve, where one of the flaps was actually longer. So when it clamped to stop the blood, it would slide like this, and the blood would regurgitate back into my heart. And so, my brain was telling my heart, "Hey, we need more blood." And as the heart was working harder to produce more blood, it just grew in size. So what he did was he took this flap and he sewed it back to where it clamped shut. And so every time it would clamp, it was steady. So pretty impressive, right? Like just incredible that I was going from having to have a mechanical valve to now he just repaired my valve and I was good to go. And he, like I said, he looked at me a couple times and he's like, you were broken and I fixed you. There was a period in which you were malfunctioned and you are no longer malfunctioned. Like you are perfect. It's like, wow, incredible. Had gone back, obviously the cardiologist that I saw in Minneapolis, that was the closest one. So in the following year, while I was around the team in 2020, I would go see her. And my first checkup with her, it was a month and a half after, like post surgery. I had to spend, I was in 2 weeks in UPenn or in Philadelphia. And then I went out to Ocean City, New Jersey. And I spent 2 weeks there just for like recovery with my parents, my sister and stuff. So when I came back to the state or to Minneapolis, I walked in and she did a scan of my heart and she sat down and she's like, I'm so sorry. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen somebody's heart go back down to its normal size with the same valve. And I was obviously like, I wasn't going to hold a grudge. I had almost just died. So I'm like, you have a different outlook on life after that. And there's bigger fish to fry or whatever. And I just was kind of like, sometimes the book isn't always, the best approach. You could have changed my life forever. And, I kind of gave it to her a little bit of like, that seemed really like negligent of you to deem only one possible outcome. And here this guy did change my life. So I was actually had the ability to come back. So I trained all of 2020, came back for the preseason game of 2021 or through camp and started back in 2021. And I had kind of lost a lot of my love for the game and ultimately, like I think I had kind of referenced to you, like the love of the game had kind of been sucked away from me in Minneapolis. Some of the staff and some of the people around there were just, it was hard to continue to keep growing. And I just really lost a lot of, again, no, this was my own doing. And I fault a lot of myself for this, but ultimately I just was over it. And so I had given myself kind of this ultimatum of, hey, I'm either going to have the best game of my life in this first preseason game or I'm going to retire. So in the second, like it was like the third play of the second quarter, I kind of reached out to tackle the running back, and a lineman drove me into the ground and my head hit the ground and I was blacked out on the field and I was fully concussed. And I walked off the field and I kind of looked around back, we were at US Bank and I just said, there's no clearer sign than that it's time to hang it up. It's time to move on. And called my dad in the locker room and just said, hey, I hope you enjoyed watching me play football. That was it for me. I'm done. And I retired. I walked up into Mike Summer's office 2 days later and retired. And so, yeah, that was kind of the end of it for me. And it was, it happened pretty fast. But in terms of, again, I think there's been a couple more players out there that have actually had some heart issues over the last, since I've retired, which is kind of ironic, I guess. And also like kind of an interesting thing that like, I don't know if they're doing, more homework or doing more research, or just doing more tests as a whole through the combine or through teams or whatever. But that was, like I said, that was the first time I'd ever had an echocardiogram or an MRI on my heart and they found something. But, so yeah, that was kind of the end of my career and yeah.
Strength coaches right now are probably wondering, like, how did you actually go and feel comfortable pushing yourself, like mainly conditioning wise, after the heart stuff? Like, how did you get that mindset? Because they're dealing with athletes, like you said, the Achilles. Okay, cool. Rupture your Achilles. Let's get back to sprinting, jumping, apprehension. But now we're talking your heart.
So, and I've said this a few times to people, I would 10 times out of 10, I would take my open heart surgery and my recovery from open heart surgery over my ACL any day of the week. Obviously it's a lot longer of a process. The ACL, even with, modern medicine today and how they handle the ACL surgeries and recovery is light years ahead of where it was, even just 2 decades ago. But ultimately, yeah, it was just a 3-month process, waited for my sternum to heal. And, I was always hoping that I was going to feel different. I thought, when he had said you were broken and I fixed you, you were essentially, malfunctioning. I thought I was going to come back and feel like Superman. I was so excited for when that day came back and I was in shape. I'm like, I am going to be a freaking beast. And ultimately I never felt any different, which was always kind of unfortunate. And so, yeah, ultimately, like, it was my head. That was, I think, for going back to where we were, what we were just talking about in terms of people's mental space during injury. My head was always right. I was so confident. Subconsciously, I was like, this is going to be a heck of a story when I come back and I'm balling out. Like, that was always my mindset of like, I'm going to be the first person, to play football with after open heart surgery. I'm going to be a beast. Like, I cannot wait to get back. Like, that's what I was telling myself over and over and over again. And so, it was just funny how I was looked at it so much more of like, what a cool story this is going to be when I come back and I get to play for 10 more years. Obviously it didn't end that way, but that was, I think that belief and subconscious, you know, standing, I should say, was what really ultimately saved and made the process so much easier.
You talked before that not only have the surgeries and rehabs evolved over the years, so has the technology, and you're involved in the technology of it. Let's talk player data. Let's talk all the things that you're doing now in the data sports world for strength coaches.
Yeah. So I started with PlayerData about 2 months ago. It's really good to be around the game again at this capacity, and I believe what PlayerData is done. Obviously, before I've been there, but also just seeing them continuing to evolve. I really have appreciated tech. Tech in sports is really hard. It's You oftentimes don't have people that that really understand tech. And when you build it, when engineers are building these tech devices or programs or platforms for coaches to use it, oftentimes those that have failed doing it are because they're essentially built by engineers for engineers, not built by but built by engineers for coaches. And so I think when I keep looking, and as I've been had more conversations about player data with different coaches and strength coaches, is it's the most intuitive, easy to use. I like to often relate it to Apple, where when you get on any Apple system, you can navigate it because it's just so intuitive. You know where you're going. It's all right there. It's clear, and it's just so just understandable. And I would say it's the same thing with player data, where whether you're looking at your mobile device platform and you're seeing it all right laid out right there, it's so easy to digest and understand. That picture of either a position group, a certain player, or your whole team as they put out what's their output, what's their overall exertion levels throughout, and other metrics, obviously. But I feel like they've done a really good job targeting this, this side of the marketplace where lean teams and smaller staffs as a whole can get the same understanding and same level of knowledge about their players and the data as a whole, without having to feel like they're going to spend hours and hours away from family and at the office. Like, it's just laid out beautifully, and I think they've done a really good job targeting, like I said, a specific side of this industry that maybe not let's say a Catapult can't quite. It's not every program or every product is not for everybody. And so I think where maybe Catapult hasn't quite either addressed a certain part of the marketplace or they just don't have any need to. PlayerData, I think, has fit in really nicely of we really fit this mold here, and we're continuing to grow to where, bigger programs, bigger groups can still find tremendous value in what we bring to the table, as it's significantly more affordable and also just, I believe, easier to use. 100%.
Well, yeah, that. And so you talk about the time, and that's the big reason for us at Strength Coach Network why we're so thrilled about it, because we're trying to get strength coaches. We talk to them about their pay, their personal life, their career progression, their sense of greater purpose. Those are the four things that they need to evaluate a job on. And if we're, not able to help them get a raise, but we can have them learn to put systems in place so they can have better time. And if their systems in place, it improves with their technology use of using player data, so they have more time to then have a better personal life or work on things that gives them more personal time or helps them move up the career ladder, then we've done our job. And that's part of the reason, not to mention the continued evolution, like the smart soccer ball, which is definitely, as Roy and I talked to, like that's going to lend to a football. It's going to lend to a basketball. Like you just see these things coming down the road.
Yeah, totally. I do feel, I feel like they're making really unique strides, very fast and very efficiently. And I think that it's awesome because I feel like there's a lot more room for them to continue to grow. And that is for what they've accomplished thus far, and still not, I'm sure, I hope I'm not insulting anybody over there, but I feel like they still have a lot more that they can continue to add and become even more complete product. And I believe that they would all say the same thing. And that when that does really become, when they accomplish some of the things that are on the docket right now, like I feel like the sky's the limit for them. And it's so cool to be a part of.
Yeah, and like you said too, I mean, Boston Red Sox, IMG Academy, USC, North Carolina for Crystal Palace Football Club, like these are Villanova, just some of these teams that are continuing to use it. Like there's a reason that Joe over at Johns Hopkins, like coaches making the move because they've realized and they've stopped drinking the Kool-Aid on certain things. Like, hey, it's better, and there's a reason that it's better. I need to investigate it, and I need to find out why.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, like I said, they're bringing on bigger programs, and I think people are starting to buy in more. And I think it's a really great time for it when I go back to the price point, because it's all about money these days. It's all about where programs can save money, and but not fall short in terms of value, right? And I think that's exactly where PlayerData has really found that that niche of saying, we're not only significantly more affordable, we're also when we look at reliability and validity of the numbers that you're getting, we're neck and neck, if not even better than the competitors that are charging you, triple what we are. So that's something to really hang your hat that. I as a salesman for them, I hang my hat on quite a bit for what they've been able to accomplish.
Well, yeah, especially then when you can hang your hat on the FIFA quality certification on that too. It's not just like, oh, it costs less. No, it costs less. And like you said, there's an outside third party standardized test of this is just as good. Like now you very simply be like, hey, you can spend more money on that tech, or you now potentially could upgrade your weight room, pay a certain player, pay a new staff member, because what I've been able to talk with coaches about it is like, hey, you can now go to your admin and say, we actually are going to, like, I'm not asking you for more money. I'm asking you to get this technology to save you money. And you think about the leadership capital that you just gained on that organization because you've told them that you're going to give them money. It's huge.
It's huge. Oh yeah. And which is rarely done, especially in the strength and conditioning side of things, because everything is so dang expensive. I was looking at a couple of these different, and you kind of, it's in a time where you kind of have to have everything. You almost feel, and I was at Georgia Southern on last Tuesday, and I was talking to their strength coach, and their program, they're running a really high level operation right now. It was cool to be over there, but they were saying, with these Nord boards and all these different, gadgets that are allowing you to see numbers to some degree. He goes, I'll just use an example. He goes, this guy was coming back from a hamstring injury. Everything else he was doing, symmetrically, everything was like up to par to being like where he was before. But he hopped on the Nord board and his numbers were like not even close. That's the device, right? The Nord board where you hang right? Am I talking about the right one? Okay.
Yeah,
And he goes,
the Nord board is where you put you lock your feet in and you move down
yeah,
there. Yeah.
you're testing your hamstring, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So he goes, we saw the numbers. Everything else, he goes, in the past, before we had the Nord board, everything else led me to putting this kid back on the field. Like he was ready to go. But when you see the numbers from the Nord board, and he goes, I felt almost as if it would have been malpractice for me to put him out there, because you see the numbers there. Again, I don't think numbers tell the whole story. I think there's a full picture you have to look at. But he was like, it was hard for me to say, to put him out there knowing that his numbers were on the Nord board were not up to par where they needed to be from his own personal standpoint. And so again, it's kind of like becomes this whole like too much information it doesn't help you at all. It becomes chaos. But I think for those types of scenarios where it does try and help, it does somewhat give you a bigger in a more grand, clearer picture of somebody's overall standing. Like it's pretty unique, and it feels, like I said, it feels like everything costs a lot of freaking money, and you got to have it all to be able to operate at the level that you may feel like you need to. So
No,
going back and saying we can save you money is not a very a normal behavior.
it's not a very common thing that strength coaches are saying, but if you say it, now you then build the ability to even go to coaches and say, hey, we'll pay slightly less. We can get more units. Like you just be able to help your own self. And then now you're being able to get more athletes tested. You can do your job better. You've saved time. And now you can either invest that time into building other better processes, or being able to have a better personal life and spend life with your family, or go get a hobby and be able to detach. So you can then do your job better.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think from the high school level too, where all these kids are doing, twice, if not three times as much as they have ever had done before. So being able to take a unit and for, show so that again, everybody's working with this kid, is understanding of what's going on. And I think that's something that other devices, I don't know if they quite have the capabilities of doing. And, they're doing really cool things. I should say it's very impressive.
I mean, again, 100% agreed. And that's why, Strength Coach Network is partnered there with them at PlayerData. As you continue, like you said, you now have that new mission and new things that you're doing, and it's allowed you to kind of sink your teeth in. What would you, as you look upon the horizon of where sports have gone since, you got in 10 years ago into college, let's now look fast forward to 10 more years. Where are we going to be looking at, and how can our strength coaches continue to push the field forward and do right by those that we serve and work with?
I think I was fortunate. I was at an event last Thursday and Friday around a lot of former players, a lot of former teammates. We were talking quite a bit about kind of this, what feels like the lack of development, where you have a lot of kids at the college level who are bouncing around and transferring, multiple times in their career. Where I think about the times where, like at 2016, the Alabama defense, you had Jonathan Allen up front, Reuben Foster, you had a back end that had been playing for a long time. This understanding that you're going to go sit behind a first round pick for a couple of years, you're going to develop, you're going to progress, you're going to become a better football player, you're going to be stronger because you've been in the same system, you've been growing and understanding more about football, and there's less expectations. But this constant chase of trying to be the first string player, and anytime someone comes in and is going to compete with you, you're going to dip and you're going to go somewhere else where you don't have to compete. I think we've seen a massive, in my opinion, drop off in developed players. Where they're walking into the NFL for the first time and their understanding of football is not nearly as good, because how can you ask a kid, a quarterback, a wide receiver to come in and in 4 months learn a brand new playbook and play significantly better? Like there's research, I don't know if there's research done, but there's a lot of evidence and facts behind those players that come in and have different offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators year after year. you just don't quite, you need the little details to really be able to play at a high level. And so same thing on the strength and conditioning side. When you don't have the ability to work with a kid for multiple years and see how they grow and develop, and how where to push them and how to continue to maximize themselves as from an athletic standpoint, or just a strength, flexibility, whatever it may be standpoint, it becomes really difficult. And so I hope that we, in the world of the transfer portal and movement across the college landscape, I hope that does get under control, because I think it's detrimental, and it's really going to negatively, or has already quite negatively impacted some of the players and some of the kids. But it's also made, I think you've seen a lot of people, I think Nick Saban is a prime example of that, of like, I don't want to be in this world anymore where I can't coach a kid hard because I'm afraid he's going to leave. That becomes really hard for everybody involved from a staff perspective to also have the confidence to coach, right? You have to feel like you can really coach a kid hard and he's not just going to run away. Again, it's a give and take, right? But
Yes.
Coaching hard is not yelling at kids. It's being able to be out there trying to demand the best, or
like, hey Cam, I know you. I know that effort you just gave me was bullshit. Like, come on, Cam, you're better. Like, you give better effort than what you just did right there. Come on, man, your team needs you to do better.
Yeah, and if you feel like you can't say that because the kid's going to run away, like, that's how does that make life easier? And so I think unless we do get it under control, I think you're going to see a lot of the great talent on the coaching side of things, strength coaching side of things, want to be in the NFL, because it's a lot.
Yes,
especially on a strength coach perspective, it's a much easier life where ultimately you're not, you don't have nearly as much of like the given. When NFL players are only with you for a couple months out of the year, if they get injured or if they do whatever, like, you have a much higher chance of being around an organization in the NFL for 10 plus years than you do in college, where you're oftentimes to blame for something going wrong. And that becomes really hard. So I think ultimately, to the answer to your question, is I hope that we as a whoever's calling the shots on the college side of things can kind of get it under control. I'm not talking about not paying these kids, because I think
not at all. No, they should
they
be.
deserve every bit of it. But allowing
they should also be held too, like you said with the pros. Like, hey, it's easier to work in the pros as a strength coach because it's like, hey, we're going to pay you this much, but here's the things you have to do. Like,
here's the absolute expectation that you must meet, or again, I think it becomes where in the NFL, yes, you do have the players are at, they have almost no control, right? And that's the hardest part about being in the NFL is you are being judged, you are being criticized, you have no you can be cut for any reason, you can be let go for any reason, you can be traded for any reason, and you don't really have that same ability to control your outlook or your future to some degree. I'm obviously, yes, you have the ability to control your play and your attitude and effort, whatever, but it's in college, I feel like it's the opposite, where programs have no control and kids can just do whatever they want. And it's just not cohesive right now. And I hope that for everyone's sake, who's in, again, from a strength and conditioning side to a coach's side as a whole, like, it needs to kind of become more in the middle, to where everyone is working together to help the livelihoods of these kids. Because what are we teaching them in the end? That if you don't want to compete, you just run away. It's not like that in the real world. It's definitely not like that. Definitely not like that in the NFL. And I think we are potentially going to see some really, really negatively impacted situations where these kids struggle in the real world. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the transition post football has been a grind, and it's been an absolute beast. And at the end of the day, that's coming for everybody. It's coming for everybody.
Amen. That's a perfect place to wrap it up. Cam, I could have talked to you all day, brother. I really appreciate you spending the better part of an hour and a half with us.
I feel the same way. I had a lot of fun, and I feel like there's a lot more that we could continue to dive in on. And but I really appreciate your time, and thanks for having me on.